Let's get into our next topic then. Should the assisted dying law be ditched? The Isle of Man, which has its own parliament, has just passed legislation allowing terminally ill people to end their lives. There are criteria. Crucially, you've got to live on the Isle of Man. You must have been living there for 5 years. You've got to have a life expectancy of less than 12 months. You've got to be over 18. Meanwhile, it's been revealed that the law will be delayed here until 2029, raising the prospect that a new government might come in after the election in whenever it is and abandon it. So what do you think, Brian? Do you agree with it?
Allegedly, the government is briefing that the new proposed law is unworkable. Of course it's unworkable. It is immoral. It is the most immoral piece of legislation, I think, in Parliament in the last 30 years. It is just appalling. And I hope it stalls. I hope it falls.
Nina?
I completely disagree with Brian. I am all in favour. And I'm not alone in this. I think at least 3/4 of the population of this country think that assisted dying should be brought in. I think people have a right to die in a dignified way and hopefully pain-free. If our palliative care was better, then we're talking a different ball game altogether. But that aside, I have not had the.
But do you want to die? Do you want to die?
If I got to the stage where I was terminally ill and I was in agony, I would want to I would go straight. I mean, for years.
You don't know that you would want to. You don't know that you would.
Right. You don't tell me what I know. I know. I've always said straight to Switzerland. Well, I don't have to go to Switzerland. Can't afford to go to Switzerland. But hopefully, I mean, I might be living in Australia, where my other half lives. And in Australia, you can have, there's assisted dying, there's Canada, there's
Brian, why, if Nina were to be of sound mind and she had something just inescapable, like the ghastly motor neurone disease, for example, God forbid, why shouldn't she say, look, the state needs to help me out here?
It is not the state's job to be involved in the death of individuals. It really simply isn't.
Or let Nina's hubby help her, because at the moment
that's
the
problem.
whole problem is
and
he gets prosecuted.
I suspect it happens. I mean, how many prosecutions have there been in prison for suicide?
Well, a lot is the answer, because these days people don't want to be at risk of prosecution. 30 years ago, they wouldn't be bothered.
Yes,
but for some reason, this is now a big thing.
But going back some decades, it used to be that the family doctor would possibly, there'd be a little gentle help along the way. Well, that doesn't happen because,
Because shipmen.
Well, shipmen, and also doctors don't make home visits anymore, and so there's not the opportunity, put it that way. But I fortunately don't know anybody who's had to watch a loved one die in screaming agony, or to the stage where they cannot articulate what they want to say. They can't move. As you say, motor neurons, one of those diseases where you really do dwindle, and it's just a downward slope, and there is no going back. I couldn't cope with that. Maybe I'm a coward. I don't want to have to cope with that.
Who decides that you're terminally ill? Who decides whether someone's going to live for 12 months or 14 months or 6 months? People who are terminally ill, allegedly, can survive much longer these days.
The old classic example being the Libyan bomber who was told he could have compassionate leave from prison because he had 3 months to live. He lived for another 3 years.
But they may not have been, a medical fact. We don't know that.
Right.
But the thing is, the palliative care thing. Apparently, only 40% of hospitals in this country have weekend palliative care. So that if you're in screaming agony on a Saturday, you can't actually see a palliative care consultant until Monday.
The hospice movement does such good work, and the hospice movement is separate from the NHS.
Yes, but the hospice movement is privately funded.
It's mainly charitable.
You've got to be lucky to get into something like that.
Yeah. Let's talk to Jamie in Somerset. Jamie, what do you think? Because it looks as if the government might just decide to lose this in the wash, this whole thing.
Well, I think personally they've made a promise, like all the other promises they've made to us.
It wasn't in anybody's manifesto.
Well,
it wasn't in any party's manifesto, not the Labour Party, not the Conservative Party.
Actually, you're wrong there, because at the moment it's like you seem like you're so anti this. At the end of the day, Nina's right. I'm sorry, but if you're telling me that including the assisted dying law that they've not promised it, and now they've not made all the other promises.
They promised to
then,
vote.
Then you need to go back to school. To be quite honest,
They promised to vote. It's a technical
It's a
thing.
private member's bill.
Yeah, they promised to
not a
vote. The
government
vote
bill.
happened, and it looks as if, I mean, I'm guessing here, but politically, do you want your first term as a Labour government to be dominated by conversations about the state killing voters? Maybe not. So you then just kick it into the long grass. And that's pretty bad. I mean, Jamie, I take your point. You may well feel cheated if that's what they've done.
Yeah, pretty much. And saying that the government has, that there was no promises have been made. Well, I could tell you now, I've read through a lot of stuff over the last few months, and there were promises made, including this.
And are you someone, when you say you went through a lot of stuff, do you mean you would have considered having your life ended?
So if like, as you were saying, if someone is of sound mind, then and they can choose for themselves, that's fair enough. But if they're not of sound mind, they need someone to make that potential decision for them.
What's the definition of sound mind?
Well, we've got this situation.
How do you define sound mind in legislation?
Well, also because I think it may be Belgium or it may be Holland where someone has had assisted dying when they've got chronic depression.
Yes.
And everyone around the world went, hang on.
No, that's...
Didn't, and she's a young woman,
Yeah.
Thanks, Jamie. Caroline in York, what do you think if this thing goes away? Will you be pleased or not?
No, not at all. I think there needs to be strict measures in place to vet it. But I would be questioning Brian if he's ever actually witnessed somebody he loves suffering the way I did. I lost my mum in November, and it was absolutely horrific. It was the worst time in my life. And I would want to know if somebody that wants to scrap this has actually really, truly seen somebody that they love suffer the way I have.
Okay, let Brian answer.
In the midst of life, we are in death.
But you've had a relative die. Yes?
In the midst of life, we are in death. Death is part of the existence of everyday
But not
life.
pain.
Some of us fall under a bus. Some of us live to be 98.
Well, if we fall under a bus, we can't help choose that. But if we have a choice, we surely should be able to have a choice of a dignified, pain-free death.
We have no choice at birth. We have no choice at death.
But I think that's very harsh. I mean, we've moved on from...
What about morphine, though? You take morphine to curb pain.
Fine.
But not. You wouldn't take so much that you would end your life. Is it a religious thing you're coming
Well,
from?
it's partly religious. I'm a Christian, and I don't know any faith community in the United Kingdom that's in favour of this. Not the Muslim community, not the Jewish community, not the Hindu community, and the Christian churches are absolutely opposed.
Well, I adhere to no religion at all.
Well, there you are. That probably answers a lot of it.
No, I mean, I think religion has caused more problems in the world than anything. We can discuss that, but that's not what we're discussing today.
Caroline,
people have the right.
Let me just take this. So interesting. William in Renfrewshire, hello.
Good morning, Jeremy.
I'm wondering whether this...
I try to keep off a bit, but this has really angered me.
Oh, why?
Basically, palliative care doesn't always work. So at the end of the day, I'd like to see some of these politicians put in the pain these people are in for a week and see how many of them would vote against it. Also, the population is overwhelmingly for it, and it'll come eventually, whether they want it or not. And just to finish off, they talk about crime getting committed through it. It doesn't matter what law you bring in. They brought in hanging and murder still went on. So these things will always happen, whatever you bring in.
Yeah, but at the moment, it's if Nina wanted to go to Dignitas in Switzerland and Grant, her partner, took her, he would know that when he got back to Britain, he'd probably be arrested.
Absolutely.
Actually, and he doesn't want that. So they have to clarify the law a bit, don't they? Because the law is acting oddly here.
Certainly, but you see, the trouble with everything that gets put forward is religion comes into it. And these people are desperate to stop these things, but I'd like to see them in the same pain, and let's see if they still agree.
That's an absurd comment. I'm sorry, that is an absurd...
No, I think it's perfectly fair.
It is an absolutely absurd comment. I have no idea when I'm going to die or how I'm going to die, and I want to leave it like that.
Yeah, but pain, we ought to be able to stop pain or refuse. At least the pain element. It's the suffering, isn't it? This is not about dying, 10 years early. It's just about not suffering in the last 6 months.
Isn't it about dying? It's about dying unnaturally.
But how do you
It's
want
dying
to,
unnaturally.
how do
I
you
want to die
live?
naturally.
I would not want to live. If I had something like motor neuron or something, I would not want to live. That to me is not a life. And I am so
That to
full
you
of
is not a life, but it may be
admiration
to other people.
But other people are irrelevant. This is my life.
Do you not worry, Nina, though, that there will be, within a year of this thing coming in, there will be a story that someone has been predated.
Somebody's poisoned their auntie for
Not so much, but it's more like just making that family member feel that by hanging on, they're being a little bit selfish. And that actually,
could you die in this tax year, please, rather than the next tax year?
Not even an exaggeration.
That will happen. Indubitably.
Right.
There will always be exceptions to whatever rule there is. There will always be things that will buck the system. And you can't. If you look at the majority of people want this. It's the majority.
But the majority probably want capital punishment back as well, and
yes.
that's not happening. So.
And I'm not convinced the majority of sensible British people do want this.
No, they do. The polls say it's about three quarters.
All right, thank you, William. Pat is in Denbighshire. Hi, Pat.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. So, I don't know, where are you on this thing?
I am passionate about having the choice how and when I die. I have a lung disease called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. It is, at the moment, it is managed very well with medication. But I don't know how long I've got before I am gasping for breath, and I do not want to die like that. Okay. My family are aware of my passion for it to be my choice when I want to die and how
do they support that?
I want to die.
Do they support that?
They absolutely understand my beliefs and they actually do support it. And I think that we have the choice, and I agree with the lady. I forgot. I'm sorry,
Nina,
I forgot
the
your
great
name.
Nina.
The great Nina. Yes, sorry, Nina. I agree with Nina. We don't let animals die in pain. I've seen people die in pain, and I do not want to be one of those people.
All right, I understand. Let me just thank you, Pat. That's so kind of you to call. Just want to squeeze in Margaret, if you don't mind, Pat. Margaret in East Yorkshire, hi.
Hi.
Were you a palliative nurse?
Yes, I was a palliative nurse. I worked for Marie Curie. I also worked in hospices.
And this could go back one of two ways, because you might say, well, look, with palliative care, we don't need to talk about assisted suicide. Or you might go the other way.
Right. That's right. I saw my first death when I was 16, and that was my granddad. And it was then, I think, that I decided that I was going to try and help people who were in my grandma and granddad's situation.
Wow.
And I qualified as a nurse and went on to be nursing until 2000.
Uh-huh.
I started in 1964.
Wow.
So I saw a lot of people die, and in that time I only saw 2 people with terminal anguish.
Okay, so you mean that they were comfortable in death? All the others?
All the others were comfortable.
Okay, thank you. We'll think about that, Margaret, and really appreciate you calling.